how's it going? Welcome back to another Sully show. Thank you for tuning in. I feel like we haven't talked beer much on the Sully show here. I think I've done like one, maybe two videos at it at the very beginning. But, we've mainly been focusing on whiskey and a little bit of like other liquors. But we haven't talked beer much. And that's what we're going to do today. Because as much as I enjoy some whiskey and some mixed drinks, I do enjoy myself a barleyed beverage from time to time. Some of that delicious carbonated bread flavored soda that we all love. Now they're obviously not all bread flavored, but some of them do kind of taste like bread, let's be honest. So let's get into it today with basically the different types of beer. Now this is not going to be a super extensive list. This is kind of just be scraping the surface, hopefully giving y'all a little bit better enough idea of the basic categories that beer falls into. Alright, so let's get started. First, let me crack open this Busch here. It's not even a Busch Latte. It's not a Busch Light. It's Busch Heavy. Because I need my carbs so I can get bigger. I'm in the bulking season of my fitness journey. So I need my carbs to get bigger. I'm also not on a fitness journey at all. So I need my carbs for that as well. What can you do? Okay, so here's the basic categories that most beers will fall under. Now, each one of these categories has a subcategory, that category is a subcategory, that category is a subcategory, so on and so on. But these are the major categories, the kind of things that will give you a good general idea of what you're going to be drinking if you just go to a menu at a bar or a restaurant. You look at the drink menu. I feel like a lot of times, they'll be like, "Oh, you can try our barrel stout or whatever," and you're like, "What the heck's a barrel stout?" I'm kind of interested. So you go to read the menu, and it's like a stout aged in a barrel. Like, well, that's not helpful at all, So hopefully this list will give you a better idea of that kind of deal. A little bit more breakdown of what is what in the world of these wonderful barleyed beverages. So, the first I'm going to start with, one of the most popular, especially here in America, is the lager. Now, if you say lager, some people say lager. Don't say lager. Alright, say lager, because that's how it's pronounced. If you say lager, you're weird, and you shouldn't do that. And you should fix it. Say lager. So basically what a lager is it's light, very carbonated, and it's kind of just like a real simple beer. It's like your Busch lager, Budweiser lager, Coors lager. Miller is kind of a lager, kind of a Pilsner, but they're also the same thing. We'll get into that in a minute. So your cheap beers are lagers. Not all lagers are cheap, but Natty Light, Natural Ice, all those lagers. All right, they're real simple. There's nothing really special to them. They're just light, delicious, and they're typically more carbonated than most other beers. Alright, next is our IPAs, or India Pale Ale. There's three categories to an IPA. There's American IPAs, there's English IPAs, and there's double or imperial IPAs. Double or imperial IPA is your typical IPA flavors, which would just be citrusy, kind of like real hoppy. The hops is what gives you that citrusy taste. So, someone say it's real hoppy, it's normally going to taste fairly citrusy. But a double IPA is just kind of a little bit extra of what an IPA is, and it has to be at least 7.5%. Alright, and then you have your American IPAs, typically, they're just called American Pale Ales, and then your English IPAs, which, they're very similar, just made a little bit different. But, it's at the end of the day, it's an IPA, There's not going to vary too widely. Alright, now, a lot of different companies make an IPA. Voodoo Ranger makes a pretty good IPA. Or I forget, the IPAs are typically higher alcohol volume than most other beers. Normally IPAs are going to be fairly high in alcohol. I've had one double IPA that's like 15% in a beer, which is fairly high for a beer, obviously. Alright, the next, this has popped up fairly recently. This is more of a bigger thing, which is your craft beers. Someone will be like, oh, it's a craft beer. Typically that means it's overpriced and doesn't taste good. That's what that means. But honestly, it's basically just like a small brewery. You know, they don't make large volumes like the mass-produced breweries, and more localized. A lot of times, they're kind of the place where, like, you go to a town and there's the brewery and they have like a restaurant, and you like see the whole apparatus of them brewing and everything. And it's normally what the craft beer things are. It's like a brewery and a restaurant combination, and sometimes they sell their beer other places. Sometimes you have to go to that spot to get their beer. That's kind of what a craft beer is. It's just, you know, small batch beer, essentially. Now, stouts. Stouts have become one of my favorite beers just recently. I used to hate stouts, but lately they've really been growing on me. And what a stout is just a real dark, typically very heavy beer. I've had a few stouts that aren't that heavy, but typically it's just a dark, heavy beer. It tastes like chocolate or coffee. Those are the two main profiles of flavors. The two main flavor profiles you'll find in a stout is chocolate and coffee. They're just real heavy, real flavorful, very full-bodied beer. And they're typically like 7 to 8%, right in that area. Okay, now a porter is another type of ale. You'll notice a lot of the beer categories are just different types of ales. You know, Indian Pale Ale, obviously an ale, porter an ale. There's a few other ales on the list we're going to get to. So ale is kind of a very broad category of different beers. Alright, but a porter, they're normally pretty light, you know, nothing too heavy to it. A pretty pale colored beer, you know, it's not real dark. It's going to be a typical kind of like clearish, yellowish, orangish beer color kind of deal. Typically they're going to be pretty crisp, pretty dry, pretty bitter. They're not going to be that hoppy, where, like, you know, a lot of ales are hoppy beers. Porters generally aren't too hoppy. Now you have your brown ales as well. Your brown ales, again, they're light, they're that pale color. I mean, they're pretty much the same as a porter. They're not very hoppy, they're kind of bitter, but they're light, crisp, easy drinking, very refreshing kinds of beers. You'll notice a lot of beers are kind of the same thing, but different breweries will slap a different label on there to try to make themselves stand out from another beer or from other beers. Well, at the end of the day, they're all very similar and they could all use the same word. But just like with whiskeys, they don't want to because they want to be different. They want to be unique. They want to be their own. And kind of just makes it confusing. But hey, what can you do? You know? Now your brown ales. Normally they're amber to brown in color, you know, kind of a darker beer. Normally a darker beer. The darker beer is the more full body, the more flavor it's typically going to have, I would say. At least in my experience. Not always, obviously, but typically darker beers are going to be more flavorful, more full bodied. But a brown ale is kind of in that in between there. Amber to dark. They're not going to be super dark. They're not going to be super light. And then depending on where these are made, really affects the flavor. They can be anywhere from chocolate to caramel to citrus to nut. It all just depends on the type of malt that everything's made with. Yeah, it all depends on where they're made and what grain and what malt is used along with the process of making it. So a wide variety of flavors can go in to your brown ales. Now your wheated beers. Your wheated beers, again, they're light, they're crisp, they're really easy to drink, they're that pale color, just nice, soft, easy to drink beer, and they typically have a more citrusy taste to it. So unlike your like Pilsners, lagers, where they're kind of the same thing, light, easy to drink, crisp, soft, all that, you know, they don't really have, like, Bud Light doesn't have too much flavor to it, it's just a good beer. These will kind of be citrusy, a little bit more full-bodied than a lager. Now a Pilsner, Miller is a Pilsner, technically, but it's also a lager, because it falls under both categories, kind of. But a Pilsner is basically a lager used with different water. Pilsners will normally use like a harder water, hard on the pH balance, or however you measure water hardness. It's a harder water they use to make Pilsners, and that's basically the only difference between a Pilsner and a lager. The next category we have is the sours. The sours are just a very interesting category, a very different category. They're normally tangy, basically fruit based, but they really do taste sour. Almost like you're eating fruit that has expired and started to ferment. And it really, I mean, it tastes like fermented fruit a lot of times. Not every time. Ooh, man. That bush is getting me. But they don't taste like that every time. However, a lot of times they really do taste like fermented fruit. They're sour, they're tangy. However, they're very interesting. You know, I always like to try a sour or two whenever I go to a bar, and you can like ask for samples. A lot of bars will give you samples of a beer if you ask for it. I like to try a sour or two every time I go, just because I'm always interested in, you know, how does each brewery do it. I feel like a sour just gives a brewery a very open slate to play with. You know, like they don't have to follow a lot of rules to fall into a specific category necessarily. So I feel like it gives them a big playing field. You can kind of get an idea of what that brewery style is, what that brewer style is, you know, how they like doing things. And they're kind of just cool, fun flavors to try a lot of times. Don't normally like them, but I'll always try them. Because the more you try in whiskeys and beers and everything, the more you come to understand what you like and don't like, what to look for, what flavor profiles there are, and you know, you notice it one time, it's easier to notice it again. So it really is just nice to try everything and get a wide, diverse, broadened category, you know, and keep that nice flavor chamber of memories going. The chamber flavor of memories. No, I said it right the first time. Now, the last category that we have is a category that I've kind of named myself. I like to call it the weird category, alright? Because these are just beers that are weird, that I don't really think fall into any category. And most of those will come from your craft brewers. From your brewers and your breweries trying to stand out, trying to make a name for themselves, be different, make something totally out there so that somebody, you know, writes an article about it and they get publicity, that kind of thing. Alright, I've had beers like jalapeno strawberry, vanilla whipped cream type deal. Alright, just weird stuff that some of them weren't bad. Like the vanilla whipped cream beer was actually fairly decent. The jalapeno strawberry was actually trash. Would not recommend that. However, it's still fun to try. You know, still interesting. But so those beers are normally very weird flavor stuff that you wouldn't really ever think you would put together, much less put into a beer. They make so they can make a name for themselves and stand out and kind of be their own person. But I hope this video has helped educate y'all out there, and hopefully now you feel more confident when you're walking down the beer aisle or reading a menu at a restaurant. You can kind of understand a little bit more about what is what. Like I said, this is kind of just a quick, broad, scratch the surface, very entry level kind of extracurricular here at the Sully School of Alcohol. But hopefully it gives you a base idea of kind of what to look out for and how you can better categorize, you know, do I like stouts, do I not, do I like pilsners, do I not, so on, so forth. So if you did enjoy, please subscribe, like this video, comment down below if there's anything else that you would like to see in future videos, and until next time, go check out some other videos. Almost dropped that. And cheers.